It's time for Security Now. Steve Gibson is here. He's got questions. He's got answers. We'll see if we can get through them. Lots of security news, too, including Patch Tuesday notes. It's all coming up next on Security Now.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit. Bandwidth for Security Now is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 434, recorded December 11th, 2013. Your questions, Steve's answers, number 179. Security Now is brought to you by Carbonite.com. Whether you have one computer at home or several at your small business, Carbonite backs up your files to the cloud automatically and continually. Plus, access your files anytime, anywhere with a free app. Start your free trial right now at Carbonite.com. No credit card required. Just use the offer code SecurityNow and you'll get 2 bonus months with purchase. And by ProXPN. ProXPN is a virtual private network that allows you to use the internet the way it ought to be, anonymously and without oversight. For 20% off your new account, go to proxpn.com/twit and use the code SN20. And by IT Pro TV. Are you looking to upgrade your IT skills or prepare for certification? IT Pro TV offers engaging and informative tutorials streamed to your Roku, computer, or mobile device. For 50% off the lifetime of your account, go to itpro.tv/securitynow and use the code SN50. It's time for Security Now, the show that protects you, your loved ones, and your privacy online with the man, the myth, the legend, James Tiberius Gibson. No, wait a minute. I'm confusing you with Captain Kirk.
James Caffeinated Gibson.
Steve Caffeinated Gibson. Well, wait, hey, everybody take a drink of caffeinated coffee. Hi, Steve. I guess we're getting a little close to the holidays here. Happy holidays to you.
Yeah, it's been cold. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, like, really cold.
We're getting winter in Irvine.
You know, of course, you and I are pussies because it's like 50 degrees. Oh my goodness!
I'm freezing.
You know, and it's negative something Fahrenheit. I swear. Yeah.
You should be in Minnesota right now, where the wind chill is minus 27.
So, the fates have sort of been good to us because this week did not overload us with stuff to talk about. Like is to say, we actually have time for some Q&A. So. I'm not sure how much, but we'll certainly give our audience a great probably 2 hours as if we go the way we have been lately, or nearly that, 100 minutes or so of podcast full of interesting stuff and feedback from our customers. We've got a Patch Tuesday for Microsoft and Adobe. We've got a new release of Firefox. The NSA was found in another drop of Snowden's never-ending dribble of slides to be apparently using Google's own cookies to track users. So we'll talk about that. There was a major botnet control center discovered with 2 million passwords, which gave us an additional look into the passwords people are using. FreeBSD, which is the Unix that I use, has decided to stop trusting hardware random number generators that have recently appeared in chips for reasons of the NSA. A French certificate authority was found to have issued an intermediate certificate that was being abused. Whoops. A bunch of miscellaneous stuff and Q&A. So I think a great podcast today.
Busy, busy, Mr. Gibson. Okay. If you take a drink, I have to take a drink.
And I've been putting this together since 5 a.m.
Holy cow.
Work on the podcast. So 6 hours of production.
We are very grateful for the work you do. By the way, you've inspired us because of the transcriptions you get done for Elaine. We've decided to do transcriptions of many of our other podcasts because it's just a great way to kind of find stuff in the podcast. It helps with searchability. I've used it all the time. I'll Google something that I know you mentioned because it will pull up a transcript and then it'll pull me right to that part of the podcast. Yeah. It's a really great way to do that. So thank you for inspiring that. And we'll have more information on that later today on our Inside Twitch show. Which reminds me, somebody has very kindly offered to and I know you probably have it in the notes a little later on, but I just want to mention this.
Yeah, we should now because I don't say much more than that. But go ahead.
Bob Noble.
Yep.
Is launching a project about early next year. He wants to. The series has been flagged for translation into, get this, sign language by IndieUnite.com. That's a free service provided by 1 Billion Hex, which is a great name for something. There is a concept demo on YouTube, but it's very rough, and it doesn't include the actual sign language yet. So the rigging and the animation of the sign language, they don't use human hands, they use animation. It's time-consuming. So he's working on a way to get this done.
So they would take the audio podcasts, and I think he said starting from number 1, and they felt because it was represented such a repository of knowledge that it ought to be available to people who could not hear them.
He's going to animate each episode from scratch. So instead of using picture-in-picture, but it sounds like a lot of work. Anyway, Bob, thank you. It is a great project. The guy was an IT guy, and he said 9 years ago, I tried to incorporate some art and acting into my work. He's always been an advocate of accessibility. So he started by doing talking books for the blind. He got a degree in performing arts with an emphasis on voice acting. Some health problems got him in a wheelchair, unfortunately. And he became the chief of the chair, that's a good name, the chair of a small charity dedicating to helping indies and organizations better themselves through media and content publishing.
And he mentioned that because we have Creative Commons copyright license, this kind of reuse is permissible.
We encourage this. For our license, and somebody else asked me if he could rebroadcast our show. I said yes. Just look at the bottom of every page on twit.tv for our Creative Commons license. Shorthand for it, it's at non-commercial, free for non-commercial use. You must give us attribution, and you must reshare anything you do in the same license. Share alike, it's called. That way, somebody can't take this, put sign language on it, charge for it, or put a paywall behind or whatever. And I think that's really, really great. Anyway, Bob, thank you. We really appreciate it. 1 Billion Hex, that's his handle on SoundCloud.com. He also has a CD Baby, showlink.in/Bob. So he does music, too. Really neat guy. Bob will be in closer touch, but a heads up, look for that coming, and we'll talk about it when it comes out, coming in next year.
And we ought to mention also, we talked about this before we began the podcast, Leo, that I spent the weekend assembling the special holiday episode.
Ooh, baby. I'm excited.
And for whatever reason, well, first of all, I mean, it was a big deal for me 15 years ago when you and I met for the first time.
Big deal for me.
I have it on tape.
Wow.
It was June 17th of 1998, 15 years ago. My hair was dark and
my stomach was small.
Well, and so we'll call these our time capsule episodes because I took 3 episodes, the very first 3 that I had, June 17th of 98, and then a little bit later, actually December of 99. Oh, and we were talking about the click of death back then with the iOmega zip and jazz drives. Then in December, about this time in 99, your co-host, Kate Patello, discovered Shields Up. I had just put it up on the net, just created it, and she was over there looking for SpinRite, and she said, "What's this?" And it turns out that I knew her name and saw her hard drive, and she was completely exposed. And I mean, which was what happened to everybody in the beginning because everyone's hard drives were out on the internet,
right?
Which is what prompted me to create Shields Up. So that episode is her showing it to you because nobody knew about it. And you're like, wait, our Steve did this? Gibson? And she says, yeah. And then a little bit later, March 3rd of 2000, I was on your Call for Help show and demonstrating it, and we were talking about personal firewalls, which no one really knew about, no one had them, and I made the prediction back then that someday personal computers were going to have them built in. because they were so important. And it was like, really? You think so? It's like, yeah, I think so. So anyway, fun commercials from back then. Anyway, it's an hour where I just I clipped out like the goods parts, and some stuff were kind of dumb. But there's like a newscaster predicting that someday that Nokia has made a prediction that someday handheld phones may be connected to the internet. It's like, oh my God. So I think everyone's going to get a kick out of it.
I can't wait. That is a lot of fun. All right. Well, we have lots to do today. It's a busy day. We've got a Q&A, first time in a month. And of course, I should mention that show will air on Christmas Day, December 25th, in place of our regular show, the usual time.
Like last year's, it's really one, you could listen to it, but boy, the visuals are something you're not going to want to miss. So since people will be home, maybe they can break their regular commute cycle and watch this one on video. This one you're going to want to see. 11
a.m. Pacific, as always, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1900 UTC, Christmas Day. Get up in the morning, open your presents, and watch Security Now. Believe it or not, Steve, there are people that will do that.
So is that what you're going to do? You're going to air these specials and bests of and things at the same time slots they would normally be live?
Yeah.
Okay,
I think that's the plan. I haven't asked, but I think that's what we will normally. That's what we do. Yeah. So if you're in a habit, and a lot of people don't observe Christmas. So if you're in the habit and it's a Wednesday and it's a normal day for you, and you tune in, you will get Security Now. Just a very special Security Now. And many of our other shows are doing best ofs. And of course, don't forget the following week is New Year's Day. We're doing our 24-hour of New Year's. I've been trying to convince the staff for years to do this. They finally acceded. Now that I'm an old man, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but starting 4 a.m. Pacific, 7 a.m. Eastern on New Year's Eve, that is that's 12 noon New Year's Eve day, UTC, and they're going to 4 a.m. New Year's Day. So 4 a.m. New Year's Eve, and you're going to come up, right?
You and I'll be together. Yep.
So we got we got a normal Security Now next week, and then it gets weird. Christmas Day and New Year's Day. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I should still be alert by that time. I won't be passed out yet. Well, actually, wait a minute. Your New Year's Day. So I don't know what we're going to do for Security Now on that Wednesday. I will have gone home. I'll be fast asleep.
Yeah, we're doing it on Tuesday. We talked about this before.
So we'll do it ahead of time, and then okay, good. All right. The best part of this, though, is you're going to get 26 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdowns. Happy 2014, because we're going to start, and I think it's Papua New Guinea, but whatever the western. Or is it easternmost? Whatever
you said, there were some half-hour time zones.
There's some 15-minute and half-hour time zones. I'm told there's 27. There's 27 time zones in the world, and we're going to try to hit each one and count down each one. That's a lot of champagne. 27 glasses of champagne. Wow. I've got to. Go ahead.
I was going to say I'll be bringing my coffee fixing stuff up, and
we'll have
be
coffee.
Tasting. We'll see. Yeah, we'll be drinking a lot of coffee.
Yeah,
I think so.
And I think I may not drink champagne. I might drink Martinelli's sparkling apple cider. It just looks like champagne.
Yeah, because you need stability to be on that ball, Leo. The ball, you need.
Oh, I ain't doing 24 hours on a ball. I'm not nuts. Our show today, actually, for a New Year's resolution, maybe you would like to back it up. Our show today brought to you by the best backup solution there is, Carbonite. Online backup. It is fabulous. It is affordable. It is secure. In fact, Steve says they do have trust no one encryption. Now, when you do trust no one encryption on Carbonite, it's cloud-based backup. Some of the features that we talk about can't work. You can't, obviously.
And that's what you want.
That's what you want.
Asking.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So you get the choice. It is always SSL encrypted on its way to the Carbonite cloud. It's automatic. Whenever you're connected, you're backing up. It's continuous. You change a file, it gets backed up. Versioning is enabled on Windows machines, which is really nice. It's a perfect solution for people who are worried about crypto locker. You're safe because you've got a good backup. And it is not a hot backup, so it's safe from crypto locker. I mean, I can just go on and on. You've got to try this thing, especially if you're in a small business, because a crash, a hard drive crash, losing a hard drive, accidentally throwing something out, having everything stolen or fire is one thing at home, but if it's a small business, that could put you out of business. You got to try it. It starts at $59.99 a year for everything on a single hard drive, Mac or PC. It goes on up. If you go to Carbonite.com, there are business plans. And somebody just sent me, Fabrizio Marin just sent me a press release from Carbonite. He's a fan, a Carbonite user. And Carbonite has announced that the home bandwidth capabilities have been increased. As a result of the increase in upload bandwidth, Carbonite home users can now achieve the same upload speed as Carbonite business users. This is a great, I tell you, Carbonite gets better and better and better. They used to, for home users, have a 200 gigabyte, not cap. You can upload an unlimited amount, but they'd slow you down after 200 gigabytes. They've eliminated that. If you haven't tried Carbonite lately, try it free right now. Use our offer code SECURITYNOW. You don't need a credit card. 2 weeks free of any of the plans on Carbonite.com. And if you decide to buy 2 months with purchase, free. Carbonite.com. Better and better. Since they were founded in 2005, same time as Twit was, they have backed up more than 300 billion files. They have restored more than 20 billion files that would have been lost without Carbonite. 20 billion. And just to give you some idea of how much data they store, it's not quite NSA numbers. 100 petabytes of data currently on their servers. 100 petabytes. I don't know how they do it, to be honest with you. Carbonite.com. Try it free right now. Offer code SECURITYNOW. That's a petabyte is a big one.
That's
Megabyte.
1,000 gigs.
So,
oh, wait, no. That's 1,000,000 gigs because we got tera over gig and then peta.
Yeah.
So tera is 1,000 gigs and peta is 1,000 teras.
Right. So it's 100 billion gigs.
100. It's 1,000,000 gigs.
100 million gigs.
just 1 million.
I don't know how many hard drives that is. It's a lot. All right, Steve, what's the news across the nation?
Well, we are here on our we just passed the second Tuesday of the month. It's funny because when we announced the podcast will be moving till Tuesday, I got a bunch of tweets from people saying, wait a minute, does that mean you won't be able to do Patch Tuesday anymore? Because we're taking advantage of the fact that we're 1 day later than Patch Tuesday sometimes. But Microsoft does release this information in some mailings that I subscribe to. So I think we should still be okay with we'll be a little more current, in fact, with Patch Tuesday. It won't be yesterday. It'll be today that those patches are available. We have some important things, both from Microsoft and Adobe, because they're 0-day fixes, meaning that they were discovered because bad guys were found already doing them in the wild before the vulnerability was known. So these are, as always, you want to stay current. There are 11 patches fixing 24 vulnerabilities. So that's kind of medium size relative to what we see on these monthly updates from Microsoft. 12 of the 24, so half of them, were remote code execution vulnerabilities. No, those are never good. You have 8 elevation of privilege vulnerabilities, which is where if you run in an unprivileged account for security, which of course is always what people should do, this is a way of essentially getting admin privileges when the sandbox essentially that you're running in with deliberately limited privileges doesn't allow those. So those are not good. 8 of those of these are being fixed. And they call them denial of service vulnerabilities in 2 cases. They're not what we think of in terms of a bandwidth flood. They're basically a crash. Something is able to crash some software, thus denying you the service of that thing it crashed, whatever it is. So 2 of those got fixed. An information disclosure vulnerability, that's one that people are considering worrisome because it involves the cloud services and the way Microsoft's cloud services function, which would allow account information to escape. So you want to pay attention to that one too. I think that was 104. And then a security bypass vulnerability. So what Microsoft is now doing is ranking these, as we've talked about before, in the order in which they should be done if for some reason you can't do them all. And they're sort of sequential. 96, 97, 98, 99, and 105. They skip a bit. Those are if you only can do some, do those to immediately prevent exploitation by attackers. And then 96 is 96 of that. The very first one is the critical 0-day vulnerability in Windows and Office. 97 and 99 of that group fix a dangerous scripting problem in Windows. And Microsoft has said of those three, of 96, 97, and 99, they're expecting active exploits immediately, and in some case, that's already happened. So those need to get done. And then the lesser important ones, 100, 101, 102, 104, and 106 should be ASAP, like as soon as possible. And then 103 is like, yeah, at your earliest convenience, says Microsoft. So anyway, do them all. End users certainly should. And I guess admins who don't have a choice, do the important ones.
Right.
Adobe's updated Flash and Shockwave, fixing 2 security holes, including one that is in the wild now, being actively used in attacks. Malicious Shockwave Flash.swf files are being attached to Microsoft Word documents and emailed to people. And, the curious who open the Word doc get themselves exploited immediately.
Is that using a macro? How are they doing that?
It's just an attachment, and I guess the act of opening it when it's attached to the doc file will cause it to get executed.
Wow.
So yeah, that's a question. It may well be a macro that is saying, run this.
Right.
So the doc says run the attachment, and then the attachment says, oh, thank you, and takes over your computer.
The reason I ask is because Word now won't run a macro automatically. It'll say, do you want to run this macro? I wonder how they're doing that. That's interesting.
Yeah, they probably get around that.
Maybe they got around that. Yeah, there you go.
It's like the address space layout randomization that malware just says, okay, yeah, well, you have that on, but we're going to get around that.
We'll just ignore that.
We'll just work
Thank you.
around.
Yeah.
We have a new Firefox that happened a couple days ago. I announced it to my Twitter followers. Not a big deal. The one really nice thing, this is version 26. So anybody who wants it, who just leaves Firefox running all the time, as I do, go to About Help, or Help About rather, in your Firefox menu, and up comes the About box, and you'll see that it immediately kicks it into downloading the update, and then you need to restart Firefox, which is fine because it brings all your tabs back, and you'll have the latest and greatest. What they did was all Java plugins are now click to play. So I don't know what took them so long, but that's now in version 26. That's a big change there, so that if any Java is part of a web page, it will not run by itself, which, yay, that's absolutely what we want. It'll show it to you, disabled, and you have to explicitly click on it in order to run it, and which is a reasonable trade-off. We know that there are sites that depend upon Java. They won't run without it, but running without intervention is a massive, as we've often talked, security vulnerability. So now you just have to click on it in order to run it. So it's like, hey, that seems reasonable. They've also updated their password manager, so it now supports script-generated, that is their built-in password manager in Firefox. So it now supports script-generated password fields, which it just wasn't aware of before. They made some changes to the way update works with Windows so that the user running the update no longer requires write permissions, as long as they have a Mozilla maintenance service, which runs in the background. That's because it's a service, it's able to have system-wide writes. And so they've arranged for the non-privileged code, which sees the update, to communicate with the service and get the service to do the update, so a non-privileged user is able to get their Firefox updated nicely. They added also H.264, which of course is now the new standard video codec for Linux, which didn't have it in Firefox before. And then there's a bunch of developer improvements and miscellaneous fixes. So anyway, that's a good thing to get, and it's easy. Just restart Firefox after you go to Help About. Okay, so disturbing news from the next Snowden dribble. And I have to just take my hat off to the strategy, because first of all, it is when you think about it, it is phenomenal how much Edward got before he left. That the fact that even now we're still getting new revelations from the data that he collected. And it's been so much more effective than if he just dumped it out on the world and said, here, because we would have, been overwhelmed. It would have been, oh my God, and the news would have been significant for a week, and then it would have been forgotten. So, this is the way to do it. What we've learned, in the Washington Post covered it a couple days ago, is that in a slide that was recently released, that it made reference to the NSA and GCHQ, the equivalent agency in the UK, using cookies, and specifically the Google Pref ID cookie, then this slide says, to enable remote exploitation. And it's not clear how that exactly works, because again, a lot of interpretation needs to be done of these slides. But the Washington Post wrote, they said, the agency's internal presentation slides provided by former NSA contractor Edward Snowden, which is, the standard byline now for these, show that when companies follow consumers on the internet to better serve them advertising, the technique opens the door for similar tracking by the government, essentially piggybacking on the tracking that other trackers are doing. The slides also suggest that the agency is using these tracking techniques to help identify targets for offensive hacking operations. And it talks about enabling remote exploitation. So, my take on this, as I started saying, is, well, okay, we have to assume, because all the evidence now demonstrates that what can be done is being done. The NSA are full of really smart people. And so, they're as able to look at traffic on the internet as hackers can, and they can look at this. And their bosses are saying, we want you to track everything, everything. So do that. And so, they're seeing users' browsers sending out cookies with, every query that the browser is making. And they're saying, well, okay, why can't we track these? And the answer is they can. If they're sitting here looking at a big pipe and they're able to obtain non-encrypted, which is to say non-SSL, standard HTTP queries, then all of those queries are containing cookies, which, wherever they're going, I'm sure you're aware, Leo, how pervasive Google's analytics are on websites. Google Analytics is like everywhere because a phenomenal number of sites use it. Well, that means that there is Google script running pervasively across the internet, and that script is making queries to Google, which are sending the Google Analytics cookies back to Google, and anybody sitting on the internet looking at all the unencrypted traffic can absolutely track users as easily as Google can. They're getting all the information that Google is, and potentially all the information that all the tracking advertisers are getting. And so why wouldn't they be doing this? It makes perfect sense that's what someone would be doing in order to aggregate this. This sort of makes the NSA like this super cooking tracking organization, because it's cross-organization whenever the connections are unencrypted, which unfortunately is still a lot of the time. We've got a question later on from someone who installed Calomel and was a little shocked by how many sites had no encryption whatsoever. He just assumed that everybody was doing it, but many sites are still not doing it. So it's like, again, we ought to assume what can be done, the NSA will be doing. And the fact is, even there's so much use of non-encrypted traffic where encryption is still only used during password negotiation when you negotiate the password. And the problem, of course, as we know from our coverage of Firesheep earlier, and if any listener doesn't know about Firesheep, go find that podcast because it is still happening. Anytime you use a secure connection to log in, but then your browsing and your movement around the site subsequently is not SSL, that means that the way you are maintained, your login is maintained is a cookie is going back and forth to the server in the clear. And what Firesheep showed was how easy it is to obtain those cookies in any open Wi-Fi setting, because anyone on the Wi-Fi it's like you're on a hub on a network. You're on a shared network, and you can see all of the cookies that everyone is using. That is their logged on session. And so it is trivial for someone to just start making queries to the same server, giving it that cookie. They're logged on too, as the person whose cookie they stole. And this is still very pervasive. So, I mean, it really does say that we need to get HTTPS all the time, everywhere. And some major websites, as we'll find out later in this podcast, are still not doing that.
By the way, Snowden, one of 10 people nominated for Time Magazine Man of the Year, didn't win it. Pope won it. There was some pretty tough competition.
That's pretty stiff competition, yeah. He seems to be a neat pope, too. So
he's a good pope. I probably would have preferred Edward Snowden, but, it's not up to me.
That's a little dicey because,
Well, remember, Man of the Year is not a good man necessarily. Hitler was Man of the Year. It's just the most important person newsworthy-wise that year, right? So it doesn't have to be good.
In that case, I agree, Leo. I think with that criteria, Snowden really does deserve it.
You tell me. Here's the candidates: Bashar Assad, president of Syria; Jeff Bezos, Amazon; Ted Cruz, senator from Texas; Miley Cyrus. I don't know how she got on that list. For good or evil, I don't think she made a difference. Pope Francis, President Obama; Hassan Rouhani, president of Iran. You see, it doesn't have to be somebody good, just somebody who made a big difference, right?
Yeah.
Kathleen Sebelius, Secretary of HHS.
Whoops.
Not Man of the Year, I don't think. But Edward Snowden, NSA leaker, and Edith Windsor, the gay rights activist whose Supreme Court case cleared the way for gay marriage. So those are all very important. But boy, I think
stiff.
Edward Snowden's, to me, on the top couple of three.
Yeah, because of the nature of the way he did this.
This changed the world.
Yes. I didn't cover because it just didn't. It seemed, I don't know, quite relevant enough. But the Silicon Valley is really getting together now and saying we've got to put together a coalition to fight this. I mean, pervasive surveillance, and they've put together, I guess, a letter and sign up sheet and so forth in order to begin to act. But the NSA was critically hurt because it turns out that what they were doing, as we know, was way more than people feel they really had a license to do.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, even Time Magazine calls it Person of the Year. I'm going back in time when I call it Man of the Year. I don't know when they changed it to Person of the Year, but it's Person of the Year or Human of the Year.
Wasn't there going to be a machine? Was it Watson?
For a while, I think Watson was the what is the history of Time Magazine's
entity of the year?
And why Time Magazine gets to decide this? I don't know, just because they say they do, I guess. Let me see the Person of the Year.
And, Forbes has their 500 and their 100.
Started in 1927. Charles Lindbergh. Last year was the president. The Protester was because of the Arab Spring and Occupy movement in 2011. Mark Zuckerberg in 2010. That makes no sense. Ben Bernanke of the Fed, 2009.
Although, remember, Facebook was a big lot of noise back then.
Good Samaritans in 2005. Bono, Bill Gates, and Melinda Gates, kind of a triumvirate. The American Soldier in 2003. In 2002, whistleblowers were the persons of the year. And I think that's what Snowden is, right?
Oh, my goodness, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's just say he won in 2002. For collectively, the Pope was picked Pope John Paul II in 1994. So it's not the first Pope.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
But different Pope.
Different Pope. Francis was just a twinkle in the eye of the College of Cardinals. I'm sorry. I'm going straight to hell. Continue.
So a security research group, Spider Labs, discovered a massive database of usernames and passwords. And so this is different than the typical vulnerabilities or disclosures that we've seen before. Typically what we report on is a given website has lost control of their database, and so we're looking at the passwords of that website. In this case, what was found was the repository from a botnet. So it's called the Pony bot, P-O-N-Y, the Pony botnet, because it uses the botnet controller is identified as the Pony controller. And I guess the controller itself is now open source, or the source has been published. And it was by looking at the source that they were able to find this one controller of one botnet. And so there are bots installed on people's machines that they're clearly not aware of that are collecting, the bots are spying on them, collecting account information, their credentials, as they log into various accounts. And so 1,580,000 website login credentials were found, 320,000 email account login credentials, 41,000 FTP account credentials, 3,000 RDP, remote desktop, Windows remote desktop credentials. That's bad, because that means that, anybody who's got that can log into your remote desktop, which, is full access. Typically, those are servers, full access to your machine then. 3,000 secure shell account credentials stolen. So first of all, we've got nearly 2 million login credentials found. But then, as is always interesting to security researchers, they look at what these are. And no surprises. The password 123456, ever the most popular password, was used in 15,820 cases. In fact, I've got a little table there from the breakdown. Second most popular, a little bit longer. People thought, well, I'm going to make this password longer. So they added 789 to the end of 123456. Then third most were a little more lazy people. They only went as far as 1234. And then they said, who cares about the 56? That's obvious, so we'll just leave that off. And then the word password is number 4 on the hit parade.
It always is. Rhymes with ass word.
Exactly.
Yep.
And then, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that made number 5 on the list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They didn't go as far as 9, but they went a little further than 6, and so that was number 6. And so forth. This is, and I don't know, 1,224 sites accept the numeral 1 as a password. So this is
wait a
just
minute,
really,
one digit?
One digit.
Just one?
That's 1. The numeral 1, and whatever it is says, okay, that's your password. That's fine. That must be email.
What?
So, dumb email servers. I just, wow. So anyway, interesting list. It generated enough news that KTLA TV had me on last.
I heard about that.
Last Thursday, I think it was. Just and Rick Romero is their consumer guy, and his mission, and which is why he brings me back and reminds people about password haystacks at GRC, is just trying to get people to stop doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just for their own good. Please do anything but that. And so which is why he likes, the haystacks idea, because I'm just saying, just do something more. Add a bunch of something to it. Do something. Doesn't have to be hard to remember. Just get it off this list, because that's better than nothing, and it's easy to do.
You've seen the Have I Been Pwned website, right? This searches that database, so you can enter in your email address.
Nice.
And the one that when I enter my email address, it says Adobe, because that of all of the accounts that were hacked, that's the one that, and I knew about that. So So if you want to know, it's Have I Been PWNED.com. Have I Been Pwned? And I don't know these guys, and it's Troy Hunt. I don't know if he is saving the passwords or whatever, but
Troy's a good guy. I would trust Troy completely.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to look. And you should never use the same password everywhere. Hey, let's take a break. Come back. Do you mind?
Okay.
We're done with that 2 million password story, so
we are.
This would be a perfect time to talk about ProXPN, right? Hey, did you see this? Good news. ProXPN, which has always taken credit cards, now takes Bitcoin. So now people have said, oh, well, you're not anonymous on ProXPN. Well, now I guess you kind of could be more anonymous, because they won't know who you are if you use Bitcoin.
A tiny fraction of a Bitcoin at the end.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Not a whole Bitcoin. Whole Bitcoin gets you years of service. ProXPN is an open VPN. Now, I know some of you who listen are sophisticated enough that you've got your own, like Steve, VPN server running and all of that with OpenVPN. But most of us don't want to take the time to do that, don't want to set it up, and don't really want to have a server have to always be online and running. So this is a hosted OpenVPN solution, and it gives you all the benefits of OpenVPN, all the security. For those who don't know, what it is an encrypted tunnel from your machine to the ProXPN servers. Of course, your traffic has to emerge onto the public internet at some point. Otherwise, it wouldn't work, unless the only people you wanted to talk to were ProXPN for the rest of your life. But I think you want to talk to other sites. So it goes to ProXPN servers, then emerges onto the public internet and goes to Facebook or Google or wherever else you're going. The point of this being, nobody between you and the servers can see what you're doing. That means if you're on an open access spot, you're encrypted. You're safe no matter what you're doing. Every bit of your traffic goes through there. If you're in a hotel and you're plugging into the Ethernet, oh, I'm safe. No, you're not. That's really a dangerous situation. Steve mentioned Firesheep. Run Firesheep. Everybody can see you, So the point of this is it will encrypt you from there to there. It also protects you against snoopy ISPs at home. If your ISP has a 6-strike rule, and almost all of them do, then you don't have to worry about that. It has another benefit. When you emerge on the public internet with ProXPN, you emerge wherever that server is. And that's why they have servers all over the world, in the Netherlands, in Singapore, in London. So that eliminates any geographic restrictions you might be subject to. You appear to be coming from there. They have software for Windows and Mac that offers advanced controls, allowing you to select the programs and ports you want to anonymously route through their servers. But they also have, and this is a really wonderful, they have apps for iOS and Android. So you can also have total privacy on your smartphone. That is really, really good news. The ProXPN app for Android in the Google Play Store supports OpenVPN. Otherwise, you had to use PPTP. I think on iOS, you still have to use PPTP. But this is a great solution. Those apps are free with a ProXPN account. Now, there's free accounts on ProXPN, and you certainly could use those. Go to proxpn.com/twit, and you can read up on what all the different accounts are and what the different features are. But the premium features, I think, are what you're going to want. Now, normally, still very affordable, $10 a month, $75 when you buy a year. But with our special offer, SN20, you'll get 20% off. Not just now, but for the lifetime of your account, forever. 20% off. That means less than $5 a month when you use the yearly plan. Great support, great people. And now they use Bitcoin. I don't know what $5 in Bitcoin is, but it ain't much. 1/200th of a Bitcoin, something like that. So Visa and PayPal, of course, but Bitcoin as well. ProXPN.com/twit. Sign up with the offer code SN20 for 20% off. And, of course, cancellation is easy within 7 days for a full refund. So you've got a 7-day trial, too. ProXPN.com/twit. What is it? But Bitcoin's gone down, hasn't it?
It's I think it was at 9 something last time I looked, but it seems to have stabilized. It didn't like crash all the way back down. It dropped down into the 8s or 7s. Yeah. So it seems to be sort of holding.
Good. As a holder of 50 Bitcoins, you probably pay a little bit of attention to this.
Well, I do love that Zero Block app on iOS. Every time I sort of see it on my list or in my little screen of apps every so often, I go, "Oh, where are we now?" And I, tap it and go, "Oh, okay." Just sort of. I mean, I'm never going to sell. I'm just going to ride this wherever it goes. And I didn't do anything to earn them. They just sort of appeared magically. My back in the days when you could actually have a PC mint for you. Now, I guess I heard some news that China's getting very interested in Bitcoin because they like the idea of a non-state controlled, currency and transactions. But, they're like setting up warehouses with mining machines. It's like, there goes the neighborhood. So, yeah, it's getting to be. And apparently I did see there's an organization, a mining pool group that said they owe their existence to us to
I didn't see that.
Now and
really
talking about talking about Bitcoin on the show. That's what created it. So I thought that was cool. So,
by the way, somebody in the chat room saying you can use OpenVPN on iOS.
Yes,
so
I thought that was the case.
I
thought
didn't
they
realize
were now.
They have both, so Android and iPhone.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, my Unix is FreeBSD. Brett Glass told me about it years ago. You remember Brett probably from the old days. He's still around. And he said, that's the one you want. That's the one I went with, and I've never been unhappy with it. It's what runs our news server, and I use a bind for my DNS server back, at the server farm at GRC. That's my choice. So Ars Technica carried a story that indicated that the next release of FreeBSD version 10, they are backing off of their endorsement and use of hardware random number generators, which have recently been incorporated into chips. Which is, it's sad, but I completely understand it. We know that the NSA has attempted to influence chip design. We really suspect, we have to suspect that the NSA influenced an organization as important and significant as RSA to choose the worst, the known defective pseudo-random number generator as the default for all of their cryptographic library packages. We have to assume that's why they would have done that. And so, here Intel comes out with a much ballyhooed hardware, quantum level uncertainty, beautiful pseudo-random number, well, actually true physical random number generator. I'm so used to saying pseudo. It's not pseudo. It's truly random. And now we can't use it. It's so sad, but it's true. We can't. So actually what they're doing is they're assuming that it can't be trusted. So they're falling back to what they were doing before, which is to use Yarrow. Yarrow was designed by our buddies, Bruce Schneier, John Kelsey, and Niels Ferguson at Counterpane Labs, Bruce's group. It's a very beautifully designed pseudo-random software-based, so therefore necessarily pseudo-random number generator. But it works on the concept of a pool of randomness, which, is the standard way you do really good random number generators now. I looked into it carefully when I was doing I needed a really good pseudo-random number generator for the off-the-grid, project that I worked on where I used Latin squares in order to generate, web name-based, domain name-based passwords. And I didn't use it because I needed even more entropy. It uses by default a pair of SHA-1 hash contexts. An SHA-1 context is 160 bits. So you essentially, and it sort of bounces back and forth. It uses one while it's building the entropy in the other one. And once the entropy is used up in the one it's using, it sort of ping pongs. It switches over to the one which has been building up entropy and then begins rebuilding entropy in the other one. But the problem is you're actually, I mean, that's really good randomness, but I actually needed more. I remember that I had what I called a UHE PRNG, ultra high entropy pseudo-random number generator that I developed. It uses 1,536 bits. And the reason was there were like that many Latin squares. And so if I used any lower entropy random number generator, then I couldn't get to all of the Latin squares that were possible. So I had to do that. But that's way beyond most systems' needs. They just need, give me, a chunk of entropy. So what FreeBSD is doing is they used to be using a purely software PRNG. Then they switched to a purely hardware RNG, not pseudo, really, fabulously random, true random. But now they're having to back off of that. So the hardware randomness and other sources, since they can't purely trust the hardware random number generator, that will all then feed into Yarrow, which is good because all of these things are like hungry for entropy. When we talk about entropy being used up, the good pseudo random number generators sort of keep track of how much randomness has been taken from the pool, and at some point they decide it goes below a threshold. That's when they switch over to one which has been collecting entropy while the other one's been dispensing it, and so they ping pong between. So anyway, this is probably a trend we're going to see. These guys are right. We cannot simply trust the hardware because it is subject to really subtle manipulation. And subtle manipulation is, as we know, all you need. Any deviation from randomness is not good for crypto.
Somebody in the chat room saying you could build your own hardware true random number generator with a few chips and a reverse bias transistor. That would be a great project. Is it true that would be effective?
Yes. Yeah, you can use, for example, a reverse bias diode, and what happens is electrons migrate absolutely randomly across the reverse biased PN junction of a diode, and then you amplify that and count them, and it generates entropy. Sometimes the problem is it's not generating it rapidly enough, and so that's what Intel did was they actually used a cross-coupled inverters which could never be in a stable state because it just entropically it couldn't be stable. I guess it was 3 in a row, and it was just like screamingly fast, and then you sampled that and got really good entropy. I tend to think Intel's probably hasn't been warped, but we can't know. But it is the case that you could absolutely build there's lots of different approaches now to build that. And there's something called the entropy key. I've been trying to buy from an outfit in the UK now for quite some time. For some reason, it's difficult to get, and they've stopped making it available. But it was just a little USB plug-in dongle. And in fact, even Yubico has in there, and here I happen to have it in front of me. This thing is their can't remember what they call it. It's one of their gizmos. It's a USB device. It's got crypto in it, but it also has a hardware random number generator built in.
Is it like true random number?
True random number, yeah.
Oh.
True, based in hardware.
Oh.
And of course, I would trust Stina till the end of the world. Not to be.
So I could plug that in, and it would spin and run some command, and it would spit out a random number. It probably has a program on it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's something special, though. That looks like a USB key. I have a bunch of YubiKey stuff.
Yeah, it is. If we go to yubico.com, you'll see It's an acronym, HMS or something or other. It's
all these Yubico things. I have to figure out which one. This one you press a button and it does something. So that's the normal Yubico. I don't know. I'll have to figure. And then I have one with the NFC in it that's really cool. That I just tap stuff to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And in fact, Google has announced that they have their U2F, I think, Universal Two-Factor project. So this came out. This news was a couple weeks ago that Google and Yubico are like officially teamed up. Google's using it in-house now, and it uses the NFC-equipped YubiKey to do second-party, two-factor. Two-party two-factor authentication.
Wow.
Of course, there's still username and password, so it doesn't have the same goals that I have with Squirrel, which is to completely replace username and password. You'll probably see that gizmo there if you find it.
I'm looking through all the
it's their hardware,
products.
a hardware something for their server.
I didn't realize they have a dedicated LastPass YubiKey. That's a cool thing. That is neat.
Yeah, they're doing great. It's really neat.
They're making relationships with a lot of different people, which is really cool.
Yeah, now that Stina's over here in Silicon Valley, she's got access to people.
Yeah. So the NSA can't hack those. That's the good news.
I would really trust.
Well, if you built your own with a reverse bias diode, then you know it's okay. Unless the NSA got to the diode manufacturer. I don't think that's going to be.
No, actually, that's
not good. Yeah. They haven't yet gotten to physics. God is not on the NSA's side, thank goodness. I just emailed Iyaz and Father Robert Ballister and said, let's do this on know-how as a project.
That'd be a great idea. I'm sure if you Google, build my own hardware random number generator, you'll find a bunch of stuff there. You probably you do a simple little reverse biased junction. Sometimes a tunnel diode is used, and then you'd run that through an Arduino. So it would generate noise. You have to do post processing. You need to whiten it and balance it, and then run your own routine to verify that it's producing good stuff. So that it can shut it down if it's not. But it can definitely be done. I'm sure people have done that.
And this is you were talking about the UB. It's called the HSM, Hardware Security Module.
Yeah, and the idea being that you would plug this into a server,
right? And
it's able to then it cannot be. It's like Apple's secure store in iOS. It's a deliberately read only, you can't write to it sort of thing, and all you can do is ask it questions. And so it creates a secure boundary such that you can keep your secrets there, and no compromise of the server is able to compromise it, because it's standing outside with a clearly defined serial interface through USB to the rest of the device, so you can store secrets and things in it. Cool piece of
$500. So
yeah. Okay, so this was a bit of spin from the French government. The news hit on Saturday, and this on December 17th. Google's online security blog said, late on December 3rd, so they were blogging after 4 days, we became aware of unauthorized digital certificates for several Google domains. Now, remember, this is one of the very cool things that Chrome is doing, is Chrome knows what certificates are authentic. And so the instant you try to use Chrome on a site with a certificate that says it's from Google and it should be trusted, Chrome will say, where'd you get this certificate? We never produced that. And immediately phones home and raises flags. And so this is very cool feedback that Google has built into Chrome. So Google says, we investigated immediately and found the certificate was issued by an intermediate certificate authority linked back to ANSSI, a French certificate authority. Intermediate certificate authority certificates carry the full authority of the certificate authority. So anyone who has one can use it to create a certificate for any website they wish to impersonate. So that's, we'll talk about why this was done versus the normal way in a second. And Google continues saying, in response, we updated Chrome's certificate revocation metadata immediately to block that intermediate certificate authority, and then alerted ANSSI and other browser vendors. Our actions addressed the immediate problem for our users. ANSSI has found that the intermediate CA certificate, now that's what they issued. So they issued this with full recertification authority because they could constrain any certificate they issue. But they said, we're issuing an intermediate certificate that can itself issue its own certificates, so that was deliberate. They said it was used in a commercial device on a private network to inspect encrypted traffic with the knowledge of the users on that network. This was a violation, they're now saying, of their procedures, and they have asked for the certificate in question to be revoked by browsers. We updated Chrome's revocation metadata, says Google, again to implement this. This incident represents a serious breach and demonstrates why certificate transparency, which we developed in 2011 and have been advocating for since, is so critical. Since our priority is the security and privacy of our users, we are carefully considering what additional actions may be necessary. Now, separately, same day, ANSSI posted on their site. This is the Agencia Nacional de la Sécurité des Systèmes d'Information. So that's where ANSSI comes from. They said, as a result of a human error, which we'll discuss in a minute, which was made during a process aimed at strengthening the overall IT security of the French Ministry of Finance, digital certificates related to third-party domains which do not belong to the French administration have been signed by a certification authority of the DG Trésor, the Treasury, which is attached to the IGC/A. The mistake has had no consequences on the overall network security, either for the French administration or the general public. Well, the general public might beg to differ, but they continue. The aforementioned branch of the IGC/A has been revoked preventatively. Yeah, because it doesn't work anymore because no browsers will honor it.
Preventative revocation.
Yes. The reinforcement of the whole IGC/A process is currently under supervision to make sure no incident of this kind will ever happen again. Okay, my comment. This could not have been human error. Human error is when it doesn't work the way you want it to. Deliberate function is when it does. This had to be deliberate. What we know is it had to be deliberate. There are two ways that an appliance can function, and we've talked about them. The way you do an appliance which wants to have visibility into the network traffic is you have only two choices. You install your own certificate into every browser which will trust that appliance. And of course, that's burdensome. That means everyone who wants to use the network will have to install a certificate to trust the certificate that the appliance has, because it has to mint certificates on the fly, which it signs. So you need every browser to trust the certificates it mints. Well, gee, that's awkward. Wouldn't it be nicer if instead we minted certificates that a trusted intermediate authority is issuing, and it's trusted because a true root authority that all browsers already trust are trusting? And the answer is, well, of course, that would be much nicer. Then we don't have to install anything in everyone's browser. So, somebody deliberately configured this appliance to work that way. This cannot possibly have been a mistake. They didn't, if I mean, whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. That they had somehow acquired an intermediate certificate with full certificate signing authority, which gave it completely unrestrained ability to create certificates. So now everyone behind that appliance was having their traffic inspected, full spying on all their traffic with no warnings from their browser and no need to install a certificate. Any corporate environment that is behind such an appliance must have must trust the certificates that the appliance is minting, so it's got to accept that in its browser. This avoided that. So this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't inadvertent. They got caught is essentially what happened because somebody ran Chrome inside that network.
Wow.
And running Chrome is all you have to do to shut that down instantly. That, Chrome will scream home to Google that somebody has given it a Google cert that did not come from Google, and that's end of the game.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very cool. Yeah, but not a mistake. They got caught.
Fascinating. And they didn't admit it, which really...
Nope, absolutely.
I think that breaches trust, and I think...
Pure CYA.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame. I mean, when you get busted, just admit it.
I don't know how they could, though. I mean, again, and of course, this is why none of us believed the heartfelt "we're not spying" after the first round of NSA revelations. Right. It's like, well, you have to say you're not.
Right. You
don't have a choice.
And of course, you assume that no one is going to be sophisticated enough to call you on it, except Steve Gibson and a few others.
You read this is like, oh, okay, that sounds fine.
Yeah, the normal media is just going to go, oh, yeah, wasn't their fault. Must have been
somebody pushed the wrong button.
Just pushed the wrong button.
Yeah. So Forbes had an interesting story, and I don't know what to make of this, but Apple just rolled out their new iBeacon technology through all their stores. We've been talking a lot about
this. Yeah, I wanted to get your security take on this for sure.
Yeah, it makes me very nervous. I mean, just Bluetooth is, I don't like Bluetooth and I don't like NFC because radio is scary. I mean, radio is very powerful when you use it right. But it's like, I mean, and Bluetooth I love. We've talked about Bluetooth. The technology is solid, but it just you have to be very careful.
And this uses Bluetooth LE, which is, to me, it's interesting because it doesn't require pairing. One of the security features of Bluetooth was you have to have explicit pairing between two objects. You can exchange passcodes. You really have some form of security. But Bluetooth LE doesn't work that way. If you have a Bluetooth LE device and an application, you launch the application, it sees the device. And that's how iBeacon works.
Yes, exactly. So the idea is like all over the store, you've got little beacons. And so as you walk to them with your phone is able to receive information from them. It's like, oh, look, and so what was interesting was that Forbes noted that in the Objective-C interface description for the iBeacon framework, it says this technology, this framework, allows you to scan for Bluetooth accessories and connect and disconnect to ones you find. That we know. It also says you can vend services from your app, turning the iOS device into a peripheral for other Bluetooth devices. and it says you can broadcast your own iBeacon information from the iOS device.
That was, to me, what was fascinating, is that Apple stealthily had included this in all iOS devices since the iPhone 4S. I mean, this is hundreds of millions of iOS devices. Now, it has to be enabled. It's an API. I mean, it's not like it's, all of a sudden your iPhone's going to say, hello, hello, hello. And
so what Forbes is proposing is that what will follow iBeacon is iWallet, and that Apple will end up producing an immediately pervasive electronic payment system based on.
Walk into a store, you have to opt in, you have to turn it on, you'll have to run an app, but you could walk into a store and they go, "Here's your coffee, thanks, see you, Leo," and it's done. The transaction's done. I think that's now. Remember, these iPhone 5Ss have fingerprint readers. They could tie it to that for authentication. Are you worried? I mean, what is the implication of this? Isn't it possible to lock it down if it's implemented properly?
I guess yes, I would say as long as the user receives something and they have on their screen and they look at it and it's not spoofable and it can't be intercepted and they affirmatively acknowledge it. And
I mean, you could do a PIN, but I think the point of all this is friction-free.
Yeah, you want low friction.
You don't want to have to make the user do anything. They walk in, they take their coffee, and they walk out.
Yeah, right now with our iPhones, of course, at Starbucks, you show the scanner the barcode on your Starbucks app on your iPhone, and that debits it from your account. So, see, I like the fact that there's that level of interaction. Radio is a little more spooky, and we've seen it being exploited. So we'll see. I mean, if nothing else, maybe a privacy concern because somebody else can be monitoring this. We'll have to. I've not looked closely at the spec and what they're doing, but I agree with you. It's going to be popular.
Oh yeah.
Real quick, I ran across a list of two-factor authentication websites. I just wanted to share with our listeners because it's kind of cool to see it. I created one of my short bit.ly links, bit.ly/2FA list. As 2FA is two-factor authentication. So 2FA LIST, all lowercase. That'll bounce you over to Ethan Hahn's site, where he's just, as his own little project, been maintaining a list of major popular sites that support two-factor authentication right now, and we can assume that will be growing over time. So, sort of disturbingly short list. I don't know if it's extensive. Maybe if anyone knows of any others, they could drop him a piece of email and say, "Hey, add this." But certainly the ones that he's got are ones we know about and that we've talked about on the podcast. So it's nice to have that, just sort of to browse through it.
But you're right; it's kind of surprisingly short.
It's not that long. Yeah.
But it's it's good. He has links to enable it underneath each, so you can go through it, see which services you use, and at least if they have it, you can enable it from there, which I think is great.
Yeah. Okay, so now miscellany things. I'll run through these quickly because it would be fun to get to some questions. I have been experiencing failure of Touch ID, and it's been annoying me for the last couple of weeks. And I was so glad then to run across many other reports. It's happening to many people.
Yeah.
And when I tweeted about it, I got lots of followers who said, "Oh yeah, me too, me too, me too." So it's a phenomenon. One of the things that I noticed is that it seems to be, for me, temperature sensitive. On a cold day where the phone is cold and my hands are cold, it's much lower recognition level than when everybody's warmed up. So I had a couple ideas, and then I've seen them elsewhere. One was, if in fact you don't get recognition from when your finger is cold, train Touch ID in a different slot, because you've got 5, train the same finger in a different slot under the cold conditions in order to have it, recognize that. Or if nothing else, just do multiple trainings of the same finger in multiple slots to give it more samples. And other people have found that maybe the polar rotation orientation isn't working as well, and so to deliberately record a straight up finger and record a 90-degree angle finger one way and then a negative 90-degree angle finger again in separate slots.
If you retrain, like you just delete that fingerprint and retrain, it gets better, right?
It works.
That fixes it.
It works again.
So strange.
So I'm calling it finger fade.
Finger fade.
Apple iTouch finger fade, because, and see, I don't know what the logic is. Were I designing this and I decided that the finger I had just seen was the finger I knew, but it was also giving me new information, I might be trying to mature my knowledge of that finger over time. That is, I recognize enough that I believe it, and oh, look, I'm getting some more on the side here that I hadn't seen. Let's add that. So if there is an algorithm where they're hoping to further evolve their finger ID, maybe it's not working right. Maybe it's like that evolution is going sour. Who knows?
It's not possible your fingerprint is changing over time.
Well,
Dr. Mom says this isn't because they use this in hospitals a lot for access to meds and things like that. She says this is not an uncommon thing with all fingerprint readers. I don't have enough experience to know that.
We know that fingerprints themselves don't change over time because
not
we have
substantively.
We know that you can take fingerprints when you're young and they're still valid when you're old. That's forensics 101 of law enforcement is that your fingerprints are your fingerprints are your fingerprints over time. What we're hoping, all of the hype said that the capacitive technology was ignoring surface dirt and was like reaching into and looking at the meat of your finger. I just think training it under different conditions is probably a good thing, and filling up all 5 slots with the same finger. Why settle for one? And, there was someone, I did read that if you fill up all 5 slots, then recognition takes longer, and that certainly makes sense. That it would have to go, if it didn't find it on the first one, then try the second one, and so forth. And so if it's going to be unhappy, it's going to take longer to be unhappy if it's got more cases. So anyway, also real quick is what looks like an actually usable keyboard for the iPhone.
Oh no, not Ashton Kutcher's keyboard. You're going to get this?
It's Ryan. No, it's Ryan Seacrest's.
I'm sorry, Ryan's. I confused the two. They're equally vapid. Really? Okay. You think this is good, huh? It looks just like a BlackBerry keyboard.
Hello. Yes. My BlackBerry is on the sidelines right now being sad. If I could have the BlackBerry keyboard on the bottom of my phone. The other thing this does, and I thought it was an interesting point, is as is the case when you have any keyboard attached to your iOS devices, the software keyboard no longer deploys. So you get much more screen real estate.
Yeah.
Because in some cases, in some apps and uses of the iPhone, it just scrunches your screen down to nothing because the keyboard takes up so much space. Anyway, this is typokeyboards.com. Anyone who's interested, typokeyboards.com. It's a case, so something comes down from the top and it plugs in at the bottom. You still get your lightning connector on the side. It uses Bluetooth to talk to the phone. Maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe if it's going to plug into the lightning. In fact, I'm not even sure that it uses Bluetooth. The screenshot shows Bluetooth on, but iOS keeps turning it on every time you update Bluetooth, which is annoying. So it sort of comes in from both sides. And anyway, it's supposed to be middle of next month, middle of January. So I'm jazzed. I will have one and I will report. Because boy, if I could have a real keyboard on my iPhone. Because I'll tell you what I found,
home
Leo.
key? What happens to the home key? Because it covers the home key.
Yeah, it does. Good question.
I guess
must be there somewhere. Oh, there it is. I see it in the far lower right corner. That looks like the home key. Yeah. If you look at the big picture in the show notes. So, maybe that would be cool. What I have found is of all the keyboards, iPhone portrait, iPhone landscape, iPad portrait, iPad landscape, my very favorite is the Mini in portrait. So the iPad Mini held upright in one hand, that keyboard is just the right size for me to type on.
Well, you can thumb type too, because it's narrow enough you can hold it like you would a BlackBerry and thumb type, and I presume that's why you like it.
Yeah, and splitting the keyboard doesn't work for me either. I like it all. I like it all together. Yeah. So anyway, maybe we're going to get a cool keyboard for the phone. I wanted to let people know. Also, I have found and am loving something called FocusAtWill.com. FocusAtWill.com. It is curated music for people who want to work. And so it's much like the Liquid Mind stuff. It is $35 a year, but you can try it for free. For free, you get a 300-minute or 5-hour loop of the same music. So after a while, it's going to be repetitive. But someone tweeted me about it. I tweeted it out after using it for a day and loving it, and I've had a ton of feedback from my followers who have tried it and are completely addicted. You can choose between classical, what they call Focus Spa, up-tempo, alpha chill, acoustical, cinematic, ambient, and then I like ADHD beta test, whatever that is. I haven't been moved to go there yet. And then in each of those, you choose low, medium, and high intensity. So you have a wide matrix of music, and it's just really good. I mean, it's completely pulled me off Pandora and everything else. I really like it. And for free, you can try it for free. There are iOS and Android apps. It'll also run in any browser. So you can just, a browser will play this, and you can see what you think. So it was Leif Jansen who tweeted this, and so thank you, Leif. It is, it's changed what I do, and lots of people are saying, they love it. A little bit cheaper than Pandora, so and no, not nearly as much flexibility. But if this is what you want, it really does deliver it.
I'm going to play a little bit of it right now. We can just relax. This is the classical. Actually, nothing's coming out. I don't know if I've done something wrong. It seems to be playing, but I don't hear it. Oh, I have the wrong. So this is actual classical music.
Yeah, but it's not like huge timpanis going bang, bang,
There's no
bang.
boom, boom. But a boom.
There's never any lyrics.
What
Nobody's
do you listen to? You like Alpha Chill, acoustical, cinematic?
Alpha Chill is nice, so try that.
All right, let's see some Alpha Chill. I like. You know what? I might get this because I do like instrumental music in the background. I prefer classical myself, but
and I've been listening to classical. It's really nice. Also acoustical. Try acoustical.
Yeah, and I like acoustic music actually. Whoops.
It'll be a little piano and.
By the way, what we're listening to
guitar.
is free, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know what the limits are in the free version. But.
Oh, I do. There are no limits except it's just a 5-hour loop. So after
it
5
repeats.
hours,
Yeah, you said that. Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah.
5 hours is enough for anyone.
So listen to this.
This is beautiful. And you use this for programming and writing and stuff.
When I'm writing or when I'm coding, when I want to block out background noise and just zone in. And I mean, there's all this bullshit. Oh, excuse me. There's all this.
I can see this music
stuff.
has really relaxed you, Steve.
There's all this other stuff they've got where it's like all the science of psychoacoustics.
Okay, I want to see the ADD stuff. Let me see. ADHD beta test. So this is the AD. Oh, this is like trying to.
Oh my Lord.
I'm ADHD. I need other stimuli to keep my brain. See, the whole thing with ADHD, you wouldn't know this, is that we actually, those of us who have this, our frontal lobe is under functioning. It's
I guess
under
I don't
functioning.
have it.
You don't have
that
this.
Would just make me nauseous.
And so, the reason people are ADHD is they need to stimulate their frontal lobe, and if they can keep their frontal lobe stimulated, then their mind works like yours does. So I guess the idea is stimulate the frontal lobe. I'm a little overstimulated, frankly.
Shoot me now.
Wow, that's Focus
at will.
Will.com.
And also, again, iOS and Android, so you can put it on your phone, you can put it in your pad, and it's just there. It's just, I mean, I've just been having a fabulous experience with it. So I know that not everyone follows me, or some who do follow so many people, my note of it might have been lost. So I wanted to let our people know, our listeners, that it really looks good. If not, I found after we talked about our faster than light drive, the warp drive last week, there was a 1-hour video presentation that Dr. Harold White did following his paper. That we had the PDF last week. There is a YouTube presentation. And a couple people, first of all, we provided entertainment for a subset of our listeners who apparently laughed. They're laughing so hard they fell off their chair. But, that's fine too. And one person tweeted saying, he said, more like less impossible. The solution described essentially requires several tons of exotic matter having negative mass. So, okay, Leo, maybe you were right that it won't be, anytime soon.
Oh, well.
And someone else did correct me. We talked about going to Alpha Centauri in 2 weeks, which actually just came from text that I read about it. It turns out it's 0.43 years to Alpha Centauri. So that's 157 days or 22 weeks. So maybe someone dropped a 2 and they went from 2 to 22. It's 22 weeks, but even that's practical if you can find a couple tons of exotic matter. So maybe we can get the Large Hadron Collider to create the exotic matter for us. Then we'll stick it into our warp drive spaceship and off we go. And really a couple good Hamilton books will get you to Alpha Centauri. That's really all you need.
That's how you measure time passing now?
Exactly.
That's 4.3 Hamiltons.
That's 4.3 Hamiltons.
I like it.
Also, quick sci-fi update. Almost Human that I talked about on Fox. I'm getting a ton of positive feedback from people who were thank you for putting me onto it. I got a note from someone who tweets as Weckman, who said, SGGRC, did you know Fox is, quote, pulling a Firefly? Now, the moment I saw that, I thought, oh, no, don't cancel this. And he said, they've released the episodes out of order for unknown reasons. Apparently, it's what they've released is 156783. And I thought, huh. And Mondays, it was really good. And so it motivated me to, again, remind everybody that Almost Human on Fox I would say it's the quality of Firefly. And we haven't seen anything like that for a long time. And, of course, everyone's nervous because Fox killed Firefly for I don't remember what Joss said was the reasons. But let's hope that Almost Human survives. I'm really liking it. It's the best thing I've seen for a long time.
I watched the first episode. I did enjoy it. I was a little disappointed because the first android he got was such a dud, and I thought, is this really the show? And then I realized, oh no, that's not the android he's gonna get.
Oh, and last night's, if you want to just jumpstart, you could watch last night's out of sequence. Apparently, it was the third one made. It's the best so far. More character development.
Okay.
I'm impressed by the writing. They did extra things they didn't have to do that you don't normally see. Anyway, it's definitely on my must-see list. And people have been reminding me about Continuum. I saw the first episode, and it's like, maybe it was just a bad day for me. I'm going to go back, now that there's a bunch of them, and maybe, run through them and see what I think. I do have a squirrel update.
Squirrel?
That is significant.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. We have a major milestone yesterday. I posted the final piece of the protocol, the so-called semantics. I had put up the syntax before, which is the way the endpoints will communicate. The semantics, of course, is what they will communicate. That's now online. The denizens of the Squirrel news group at GRC are plowing into it, figuring out what I've done, and I'll be looking at their feedback. This was just yesterday, so it just happened. What this means, though, is once the dust settles from this, I finally start writing code. There is enough there that everyone once we agree upon this, we'll be able to write code to implement Squirrel. So I'm very excited. That generally goes pretty rapidly compared to just it's been a real process getting to where we are, but we're there now. We have a robust specification, future-oriented, open-ended, so it can grow and do other things. And, I'm ready to write code. So the people waiting for version 6.1 of SpinRite will be glad of that also, because this certainly represents a good step in that direction. And speaking of SpinRite, actually, in this case, what we've got now is 6.0. In keeping with the spirit of a Q&A, I ran across a question in the mailbag from Jared in Australia, who asked a question about SpinRite and solid-state media. He was a little bit confused about SSDs because he said, hearing a previous question on recovering data on SSD, I don't really get this. On the one hand, you say, yes, SpinRite can be run on SSD, and you don't do anything to prevent this, but you also say that SSD and flash media have limited write cycles. So running SpinRite on SSD also wears them out. How can this be a good thing? And so I wanted to, for people who haven't heard, and also for Jared to answer his question, SpinRite has what we call level 2, which is a faster operating read-only scan, which looks for any problems on media. That makes much more sense. It's the only thing that makes sense for SSD, but it also makes sense because SSDs don't have defects the way hard drives do. That is, physical defects where it makes sense to pattern test in order to find them. So level 4 is a read and write test that you do not want to run on SSD because it would tend to fatigue the SSD substrate, but which you do want to run on drives when it makes sense, because it's like sort of a deeper level of testing. So yes, SpinRite runs on SSDs all the time. And in fact, in the show notes, I posted something else, not from Jared, but Leo, you can show this. It's a little frightening. It's actually from a customer. It's a customer photo that was supplied showing SpinRite running on a brand new Kingston SSD where the smart system is already getting concerned. There's a red dot at the far right end of that bar because what's happened is essentially SpinRite is running and the SSD is using error correction to such a high degree.
Look at the error count. It's 2.9 million.
I know. It is horrifying. And so this should forever disabuse us of the notion that because it is solid state, it is error-free. What we're seeing here is perfect evidence that they have pushed the density of SSD storage, that is commercial pressure to cram more density in essentially in smaller and smaller cells, has resulted in solid state storage having an effective error rate arguably right up there with hard drives. And not only is the absolute error count horrifying, nearly 3 million, depending on how far he went, but the other thing that is a concern is look at the spread between minimum and maximum. What I do is those numbers are errors, corrected sectors per megabyte. That is, I deliberately do the math so that the units have meaning. The units is corrections per megabyte. And so what this says is that there was a region on the SSD where we were only needing to do about 1,500, the minimum, 1,500 corrections per megabyte. But there was a different region where we were having to do about 25,000 corrections per megabyte, meaning there's like a bad area on this SSD compared to like the better area. What you'd like to see with something semiconductor would be some uniformity across the surface. So I'm seeing instances now where we're seeing the the quality of these drives beginning to come down. And I've never mentioned it on the podcast, and I sort of meant to a while ago, but our listeners may have noticed that warranty length was kind of quietly crept downwards. It used to be that I think they had like 3-year warranties. They've dropped them to 2 years and 1 year, just sort of very quietly saying, we don't want these back after a year. So you're on your own, because warranty periods used to be substantially longer, and that's not the case any longer. So
do you recommend against SSDs, or should you go with business class or lower density?
I'll tell you what I would do. I would do what Compaq used to do, Leo, at this point. Compaq used SpinRite on their loading dock to pre-qualify their drives.
Wow.
The manufacturers didn't like it, but they had no choice. Compaq over-ordered what they wanted.
Wow.
They ran SpinRite, and they returned the worst of those.
Isn't that interesting?
I would buy 2 hard drives and run SpinRite on them both and see if they're different. And if they're different, return the weakest one.
You are
Why not?
The weakest
Why
link.
not? Why not? Everybody will take them
It's a
back
great
without
idea.
questions. Yeah.
Buy 2, return
I would
1.
buy 2.
Buy 3.
Well, see, and that's the other thing, is that people sometimes show me a screen like this and say, is this bad? And I was like, I don't know, because
What's normal?
every make and model differs. Now, what is definitely bad is this one, that smart error. That is the drive itself rating itself as weak. Mm-hmm. The drive is saying, wow, I'm doing more error correction than my firmware controller thinks I should be. Because the firmware controller in the drive is separate from the medium. The medium is like chips out there. The firmware controller has been designed to it's counting error corrections, and it's saying, ow, I'm dropping the health rating because this is more ECC than I expect. So that's an absolute reason to send this back. And this was a brand new Kingston SSD that the guy bought. And he said, this doesn't make me feel comfortable. And I said, and it should not. But what you could also do, the reason when people just show me a screen is like, I don't know if that error count is bad or good. But if you had 2 drives of the same make and model, if you bought a pair, by comparing them, if one is generating a lot more errors than the other, that's the one you don't want to keep.
And I guess if you built 2, or 3, if you buy 3, you'd have.
Then you'd really know.
You'd really know.
You'd have 2 that are similar and an oddball that's like, ooh, boy, you go home.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Hey, we got questions, and we have time. We'll do as many as we can. But before we do, wouldn't be a bad idea to mention our great sponsor, IT Pro TV. These are guys who have watched the screensavers, as so many of you did. I know, thank you. And we're kind of inspired by the style of the screensavers to create their own screensavers for people who want to learn IT certs. If you go to itpro.tv, you'll learn more about it. Their slogan is "Learn without even knowing it." IT.
And Leo, I was thinking about these guys this weekend when I was putting together the time capsule episode for the special holiday podcast.
Yeah,
because it shows the screensaver's
it looks
basement
like the set, doesn't it?
Yep, exactly.
It looks just like the old set. Although they did some things that I wish we had thought of. For instance, they have giant PC, the backs of PCs with giant fans on them and stuff like that. It's wonderful. Tim, Don, and their team will teach you the things you need to know to get those key certs. And if you look at the episode library, you'll see that we're talking not just A+, all the CompTIA certs, A+, Net+, and Security+, but also Microsoft's MCSA, Cisco's CCENT. They're working on new ones. You can see that's what those red bands mean. They're coming soon because there's always new content. In fact, you can watch live during much of the day, and that, just like us, the advantage of live is you can participate in the chat room. And just like us, when they're not live, and of course nobody can work 24 hours, I think they are live right now. Yeah, there they are. You see, they got the TriCaster. They use the same stuff we use, the same mics, the same equipment. These guys really put a lot into this. and it shows hundreds of hours of content. They add 20 hours of content every week. It's fun watching them. I mean, just like you watch us, you leave us on in the background, you could leave them on in the background, but you're filling your head with the stuff you need to know to get your certification. Things like network security, laptop repair, VLAN, subnetting, and more. Each episode library is organized by exam objective. Is that Tim? I think that's Tim down there. Making it easy, or no, it's Don. I always confuse the two. Making it easy to target the areas to successfully pass the certs you're prepping for. The hosts make it fun, just like we do with engaging stories. They share their experiences. They know this stuff. They've been doing it for years. The shows are streamed live, but you can also get them on your Roku. I love that, on demand. Roku, computer, your mobile device, both HD and SD quality. And the nice thing is you pay one low, flat fee per month. Now, normally that's $57 a month. $570 for an entire year. Still a lot less. Uh-oh, looks like Don's got a problem. Well, that's a lot less. More coffee, Don. That's my suggestion. A lot less than getting a cert in a school. But I'll tell you what, if you use the offer code SN50, you're going to get 50% off your subscription for the lifetime of your account. And that is awesome. I should say hi to these guys. Let's just type in, hi, guys. Leo here.
We're talking about you. Are your ears burning?
Are your ears burning? I love this. It's so much fun. I have to say, if you've got to learn this stuff, and I'll tell you, if you want a job in the business, unfortunately, you often do have to learn this stuff. You can't skip over this. This is the way to do it. itpro.tv/security now. SN50 is the offer code. And you can, the entire library is yours for 50% off for the life of your subscription. That's $28.50 a month. That's less than one prep book. And you're going to get everything you need. I think this is really fabulous. I just love these guys. itpro.tv/security now. Offer code SN50. Learn without even knowing it. All right, are you ready for questions, Steve?
Well, now, okay, we are, but we're approaching 100 minutes on the podcast.
Is that your new benchmark, the 100-minute?
Well, I always put the minutes down. Yeah, it seemed. I mean, that's like that's a good podcast.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll do a couple questions, and then we'll just continue next week with another attempted Q&A.
We've been attempting this for a month now. Here we go. Listener-driven potpourri. Doug. Whoa. Let me just... Gernetsky, I think.
Gernetsky. Yeah, Doug
nice
Gernetsky.
Polish name. Doug Gernetsky in Appleton, Wisconsin. He caught Steve's attention with his subject line, the 800-pound gorilla you won't talk about. Healthcare.gov just had an investigation on web security. I heard about it all week, and I'm surprised not to hear about it on Security Now. If you didn't cover it because of Leo's politics...
I know. Keep going.
Oh, Lord. Will you discuss it elsewhere? It's kind of a big deal after all. It's only the medical records and personal info and passwords for America. Thanks, Steve. Philip Lane also asks, have I missed it? I was going through show notes for past shows looking for an informative show on healthcare.gov, and I see nothing in the notes. You've not even touched on the subject? There's so much information out there on the ugliness of this rollout, capacity, and security issues. I find it hard to believe you haven't covered this news. Well, it's because of me. I'm a lefty, and Steve doesn't want to go against me.
It's actually not because of you at all. You know, Philip Lane says, just looking for some nonpartisan reality. And for one thing, it is the whole issue is so fundamentally partisan.
Thank you.
That it's difficult to know what reality is. But mostly, I just assume that it is the nightmare, catastrophe, catastrophic disaster from hell. I mean, it's like, why bother talking about it? Just assume that it's a massive fiasco. Apparently, about half of the state-run sites do what we were talking about earlier. They log you in briefly with SSL, and then you have a persistent cookie which allows anyone to take over your session and have access to all of your data. I mean, it's like I was explaining this to Jen because, initially it wasn't even working. I mean, like two people could use it at once. And I didn't assume anything different. It was like, okay, this is a fabulous fiasco disaster on the part of the government. And when I heard that it was loading, the website was loading 60 different individual JavaScript files from all over the place in order to function. It's just, okay, forget about it. So
the problem is it's hard to get real information. You're right. It's certainly assumable that there's a problem. But CBS News, for instance, aired a report about security issues that was wrong.
See, none of them know what they're talking about.
That's the real problem.
One problem. And I don't know what I'm talking about. I only know how hard it is. I mean, everyone who listens to this podcast knows it is so difficult for old school, serious internet companies like Amazon or Twitter or Facebook, full of serious techie gurus, to get this right. It is really hard. And this was the point I made to Jen, I said, Jenny, it doesn't even work. I said, working is the first bar you have to get over before, and unfortunately, security is always an afterthought. When we see this over and over, we should just assume that there is no security whatsoever, and that some year after it finally works, maybe it'll start being secure. It's such a catastrophe, I've just ignored it. So the reason I haven't talked about it is just I really had nothing definitive to say. I need details. I need specifics. And it's just like,
Fox
is the ocean...
News, CNBC, CBS, you're not going to get the technical details you need.
Is the ocean wet? Well, yes. It's like beyond security. It would just hurt you to start looking at it. So there's just nothing that I have to say. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to take my own time. People would much rather have SpinRite 6.1 and Squirrel than me going and looking at healthcare.gov and taking it apart. It's just assume.
It's funny because of the four security experts that testified in front of Congress, one said exactly that. Avi Rubin, who we know as one of the great security guys of all time, he's a professor at Johns Hopkins, he said, I would need to know whether there are inherent flaws versus superficial problems that can be fixed. If they can be fixed, that's better than shutting it down. He, like you, said, we aren't getting the information to make any conclusion. Yes, there's possibly cross-site scripting errors. It's certainly possible to phish people and trick them. And some of this mainstream coverage is simply that. You could get a link in an email that says it's healthcare.gov and it looks like healthcare.gov, but it's not. But that's going to happen with any site. So it's hard to really know. And I think that...
Well, see, and that's my point. It's uninteresting to me. It is such a disaster that it's uninteresting. It's just like, okay, it's horrible.
Yeah.
And I'm not blaming anyone. To me, it's horror is nonpartisan. Its horror is a fact. And someday they'll get it fixed. They now they understand that there's problems. Security is like the next thing they're looking at after getting it working. It still has a very pathetic number of total. I just saw the number this morning, twice in November as in October, but we're still down at 250,000, right, which is way shy of 7 million that they were like with some benchmark they were hoping for. So yeah, it's uninteresting. What's interesting is something I can get my teeth into. This is just, it is the 800-pound gorilla, and I don't want to try to bite it.
Well, and there's a lot of partisan information for the four security experts who testified for Congress. One of them is the former senior law enforcement advisor to the Republican National Convention and a cybersecurity analyst for Fox News. I have a feeling he has a partisan point of view. A lot of these guys are, in fact, not what I would call. One guy is a former CSO of Diebold, the famous electronic voting company that had the worst security record of anybody I've ever heard of. So
in this situation, I would say believe the worst that you hear.
Assume the worst. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
because with security, we have to assume the worst.
Right.
It is, as we know, it's about a the weakest link in the chain. I can't even begin to imagine the chain that this thing has.
The problem is a lot of people have to use this. Their employers are saying, "Hey, we're not going to give you health care or whatever." I mean, the security advice would be just don't use it till they fix it. But a lot of people have to.
I mean, if there's ever been a need for making up a new password when you identify
that
yourself,
one for sure.
Do it here.
But I presume you've got to give them your social. I mean, you're giving them a lot of information. I don't know if you have to give them your social, but you got to give them a lot of personal information, including.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a catastrophe. It's a disaster. So I hope I've satisfied any listeners who feel like I was afraid to talk about it. It's not at all that I've been afraid to talk about it. It's like, where do you start? I mean, we'd like to talk about something else, but if we have to talk about that, it's like this will become the healthcare.gov disaster from hell podcast.
Yeah, assume the worst.
I mean, oh my God, yes,
good. I like it. Yeah, it's not good.
It's beyond. It's like it doesn't even work. So of course it's not secure. It has to work before it has a hope or a prayer of being secure.
Yeah, it doesn't even work.
Someday they'll do that.
Yeah. And by the way, Web 6121 is pointing out that you don't have to use the website to sign up. You can phone in, which is probably a good idea. We don't know how well secure the databases are, but
I was going to say the problem is they're probably using the website on your behalf.
Maybe they are. I don't know.
When you phone up.
I don't know. Yeah. We don't know. That's kind of the bottom line. Ron Bogner in Glendale, Arizona, has some thoughts about 256-bit identifiers. Ron says, it amazes me that people who have a problem with 256-bit identifiers do not mind a 10-character username paired with an 8-character password. And he gives a sample BitTorrent sync secret, which is a very long 256-bit identifier. Here's a sample username and password, johndoe@yahoo.com, monkey12. Obviously, the 256-bit secret is magnitudes more secure than the password username combination. And that would be true even if you used a random 15-character password instead of something more typical like monkey12. He does some math. We've said this over and over again. I think the issue isn't so much that we don't think it's secure, the fear of collisions.
Yes. Yes, and in fact, that was my math that I added there.
Oh, that's your math. Oh, all right.
Yeah, it was just because I wanted to point out it's people assume that 256 bits uses 8 bytes, but if you use the full character set, a byte is 256 characters. Well, first of all, we immediately throw a bit away because we have 127 characters. But then when you throw all of the 128 technically, although null is invalid, so 127. But then, and so that would be 7 bits. So you would divide 256 by 7 in order to get the number of characters, except that many of those are control characters. And I went over to my own password haystacks page just to remember what the alphabet size was. And if you use all upper, all lowercase alpha, all 10 digits, there are 33 typable special characters. So that's a total of a 95 character set. And one of the neat tricks I've always loved, if you wanted to know like how many bits 95 was, because it's an odd number, right? It's bigger than 64, which is 6 bits, but it's smaller than 128, which is 7 bits. It's 95. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. Well, it's like, okay, where? So if you take the log of 95 divided by the log of 2, because 2 as in binary, that ratio gives you the exact number of bits, binary equivalent, because you're dividing by the log of 2, that 95 is. So it turns out it's 6.5699 bits per character. We're rounded up to 6.57 bits per character. Then you can divide that by 256 bits, which is the actual amount of entropy possible, and that tells you that it's about 39. It's 38.966 or 39 characters rather than, for example, just 32. So you get actually a bunch more characters when you treat the alphabet correctly. But he's right. Certainly that's unique. I think, as you said, Leo, what people are concerned about is collision. And we do have a question we'll probably see next week further on down here that talks about that, how one listener thought we were being a little too glib when we said it's impossible. Because he says, well, it's not impossible. It's like, okay, Spock. So
I believe your logic is flawed.
But that does mean that we have to be very careful with randomness because we know that that's a problem. And I think the other thing that makes people uncomfortable is that when you're creating an account somewhere, you put in a username and it says, oh, that username is taken. So you go, oh, okay, well, unfortunately, in the process of being told that, you now know somebody else's valid username, and you could then start guessing their password. And of course, the reason that email is so handy is it is known to be unique. But the only reason it's known to be unique and for you is that somebody else told you that there was already a John Doe at yahoo.com. That's why you had to go John Doe 2048 or something to get a unique version of John Doe. So that's it. So the idea is that then you reuse that everywhere because that's been assigned to you. And that's the way we avoid collisions. So the fact is, except for the Spock instance, with really, really high quality random numbers or pseudo-random numbers, there is no practical chance of a collision. There is much higher chance that of anything else in the universe going wrong than there being a collision of two identities. Your computer could fail, your power could fail. We talked about the asteroid hitting the Earth. Everything else is going to happen before there's going to be a collision if we choose random numbers carefully. And with their 256 bits long.
So we are out of time, but I want to read this 11th question because I think that it would be good to address this now, and then we'll put some more questions together for next week.
Well, I'm going to carry these on to next week. We'll try to get to them.
Scott Shrem in Philadelphia says, what about show notes? I love the Security Now podcast. Great topics. Usually after the show, I go to the Twit page, twit.tv/SN, in search of the links talked about in the show, but the show notes are always non-existent. There is a link to show notes, but it's always blank. It seems to be the same with other Twitch shows. I cannot find any show notes on the GRC page either. The text transcripts are great, but I don't have time to read that. I'm looking for a short, bulleted list of all the topics mentioned and any links included with those topics. Can you please ask Leo about this? Thanks.
Okay, so we need to explain a little bit about how we operate here. You and I get together for 2 hours and do this, and then sort of go our separate ways. After a few hours, your guys put the audio together. I download it and then get it and then shrink it and get it off to Elaine, and then she produces the transcripts, which come back to me. For the last 3 weeks, I have, counting this one as number 3, I have been finally, for the first time ever, posting the show notes on GRC. So if you go to grc.com/SN, which is the main Security Now page, you will see now an additional icon in the lineup. There used to just be 5, high quality audio, lower quality audio, and then the transcript in 3 forms, text, HTML, and PDF. There's now a 6th one, and it's the 3rd one over. It's after the 2 audios. Looks like it's one of Microsoft's old icons, little cubes tumbling together. That is now a PDF of the show notes that you and I go through at the beginning of the show. I tweet it before the show because I've had a lot of positive feedback from our our live listeners saying, hey, it's so fun to be able to follow along, which everyone can now do. So if your guys, Leo, want to do something with the show notes, they're welcome to. But for what it's worth, I will, from now on, always have them on grc.com.
Yeah, and so, and this is a terrible thing about everything that we do is that we are highly resource constrained. It probably feels to people like, and we've certainly encouraged that this is a big operation, and we got editors and big studios and stuff. But one thing we don't really do a very good job of, we had hoped to crowdsource show notes, and we don't do a very good job of that. For a while, we did do a pretty good job of keeping the Security Now show notes up to date. I would paste in your notes, because you do very good notes. Of all the hosts, I think you, Paul Thurrott, and Mary Jo Foley do the most complete notes. And it would be, and I should be just putting them on the wiki. So that's why it's a wiki, by the way. It was our hope that people who listen to the show regularly would go on the wiki and parse those notes and so forth, because I don't have time to do that. And I haven't even had much time I'm busy doing the show, so I don't have time to paste it into the wiki. And I apologize, I slacked off on that. We should probably have a full-time person doing that. I just can't afford it. And it would be probably 2 full-time positions. So, we're talking 100,000 a year.
In fact, yeah. And if you were going to do notes for the other podcasts that didn't generate their own notes,
what I mean. It would be
in order to drive them,
right.
that would be
massively
labor.
We have always rundowns somewhere. We share rundowns on Google Docs and stuff, and we do our best to put together notes. But I understand it's a complete failure. We've never done a very good job. And I apologize. Thank goodness Steve is putting his show notes up, and that's everything you want. So to answer that question, it's getting done there. But
they are always available from now on there.
It is a global failure of mine, and I don't know what to do about it.
Well, it's just maybe there will be something, but at least you can always find them for Security Now at my site.
Yeah, thank you, and I will talk to Lisa and see if we can. Figure this out. You have to understand, hiring a staff person to do this is very expensive. It's not just the salary, it's the benefits, it's all of that.
Well, and I can't speak for what the value of the notes. I mean, I guess I'm liking that I'm now publishing them, because what I used to have to do before is I was tweeting these links all the time, and I'd be saying, I just tweeted this link, I just tweeted that link, so to help people who want to go find it. Now, this is what drives the podcast. So the notes are there. Anyone who wants to find a link knows where they're going to be. Yeah. So, but my question would be, do notes really make sense for all of your other podcasts? Are they, going to have stuff in them that people are going to want to find and follow up on? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, show notes are really important, primarily because it makes it easier for a listener, but also it makes it searchable. And that's where your transcriptions are so great. And it's one of the reasons we're going to start doing transcriptions on more shows. We'll talk about that on Inside Twit later today. We're going to pay the money to do that anyway. That's not show notes, though, as Scott pointed out. I mean, that's just that's too voluminous. So we got to figure it out one of these days. There's so many things I'd like to do, Steve. You know how much it's going to cost? We're redesigning the twit.tv's website, which we redesigned last year, and it's not working. That was $150,000. It's now almost twice that to do it again. It's expensive. I wish I had more money. But at least we've got our fine sponsors. At least we've got this great show, and I thank you all for being here. And I especially thank you. We do, Steve. We do this every Wednesday, at least for the next week.
Yeah,
2 weeks.
One more. Wait.
Two more.
Yeah, because Christmas will also be on Wednesday.
Yep. 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1900 UTC. Then we move to Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 2100 UTC. That'll start January 7th. And
I'm
the
going to like
Christmas...
that.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm going to like that because it'll give me another 2 hours to prep. I work from 5 a.m. until 6 to get this ready.
Now you can get up at 7.
Yeah, well, or just be a little less frantic in the morning.
Anyway, I really appreciate your doing that, and I understand that it's perhaps for us some a deal breaker, but we do make on-demand audio and video always available, and you can listen at any time at your convenience after the fact. And it's got everything we talk about, except for the bad words, which are bleeped, at twit.tv/SN. Steve has 16-bit versions at his GRC website, grc.com. He also has a little thing called SpinRite you ought to have. If you've got a hard drive, even a solid-state one. I like this idea. Buy 3, SpinRite all 3, keep 1.
Yep.
I like that idea.
Exactly. Find the best of the crew and send the other 2 back.
Yep. You could do that, too, at grc.com. And if you have more questions for feedback, go to grc.com/feedback. That's easy to remember. Thanks, Steve. We'll see you next week on Security Now.
for Q&A continued. Thanks, everybody.
Little more.
Security.